Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value. You're going to hear me say that again in just a couple of seconds here because we made a mistake. We don't often make mistakes here at Maximize Business Value, but when we recorded the podcast that you're about to hear and the second half of it that you'll hear next week with Susan Bryant, we realized that this is really a lot of great information, and we wanted to break it up into two components for you. And in fact, because we decided to break it, we're actually going to give you the second half of the podcast first today. Connor's going to give you the intro, but then we're going to do the second half of the podcast today because it is really important to take action on this information before year end. And so it's all about year end planning, tax planning, things like that. And we wanted to get that in your hands as quickly as we could. Now, next week, you'll get the benefit of hearing the first half of the podcast, which is all about Susan's new ebook, which is a CPA's recipe to business success. And so I'm excited to share the second half of the podcast with you today. Next week, we'll be back with the first half of the podcast. Sorry for the confusion. You don't often get to see us, catch us in mistakes here, but this was a fortuitous mistake. So your great things are in store for you. Thanks for listening. We're back with CPA Susan Bryant. Before the break, we talked about your ebook. Now we're going to shift over and talk about year-end planning. We may put these in a different order. So you listeners, I hope I don't confuse you with all of this. Now, I know your firm schedules tax meetings. You mentioned that earlier, tax meetings with your clients each year. What kinds of things are you exploring with your clients during these tax meetings?
Well, tax planning is it's a really lengthy process for us. But what we're really doing is the first thing we're examining their accounting records. Typically, we're doing the accounting, but we're re-examining from a tax perspective. If we don't do the accounting for them, then we are looking at their accounting records and assisting them with any light housekeeping that might need to be done to make sure that they are in good working order prior to a tax return being prepared. Then we're actually projecting what their tax liability is going to be, so they know before the end of the year, this is how much I'm going to owe in taxes come either January 15th with safe harbor or 4/15 with extension payment. Then we get into what could we do to impact this tax liability. So this could be anything from retirement planning to entity organization and restructuring, taxation of the entity, to proper insurance, so split dollar insurance policies, C corporation usage. Oh my gosh, we talk about captives. We talk about paying your kids. This year, have you done the employee retention credit? What about tax credits related to hiring, the work opportunity credit, qualified tax zones? Opportunity zones. It's a really, really long list. Again, wow. All of these particular things they're going to differ from client to client. One of the things I talk about with my team as I'm coaching them and having these meetings is tax planning takes cash. It's going to take cash in order to save taxes. But for every dollar that you can keep working in your business, you're going to get an ROI on that money. So it's worth making sure if we're spending that money working on something in our business, we save the taxes and we have a potential for further ROI on it. That's incredible. And that's why we do tax planning, because we got to keep more money in the business.
That's investing in the business. You need to be able to articulate the return on investment. So I'm so glad that you do that with your clients to talk about how reinvesting in their business can give them a greater return later and reduce their tax liability so that they have that cash to be able to do that. Now, are there any things that you hear going on out there, the actions that you would not recommend that your clients who might be focused on tax reductions?
Oh, yeah. Well, Okay, do not write off a bunch of personal expenses in your business. I mean, business expenses, yes. Business expenses that, were previously personal but are now business. Yes, those are still business, but like people who are paying their mortgage out of their business, like, oh, I'll just consider that my home office. That's not going to fly. You can't pay also
Do
if
they
you
do that? I know
I've
they
seen
do.
I've seen all sorts of stuff, Tom. You'd be surprised. People are trying to justify like entertainment expenses and try to get a deduction for those. I mean, it's 0% deductible. It's just not going to happen. So don't even try to push it. Same with like haircuts or grooming or pet. Like, oh, I have a what do they call them? Where they're comfort to you, the animal like security type thing. That's not a good idea. Clothing, no, that's not acceptable either. I mean, there are
About
listed
my
business
logo shirt. Can my logo shirt count?
your logo shirt counts because yes, that's swag. That counts as promotional items. But if
Okay.
it's normal clothing, like suits and ties and dresses and stuff, you just sorry, not acceptable. But we have a deduction guidelines list on our website on the resources tab. And I always point people there because it's sort of the do's and don'ts. Like, definitely don't do these, but definitely consider these if they are in your business. The one thing that I always try to remind people, especially my new business owners when I talk to them, is what is ordinary and necessary in your business might be not be ordinary and necessary in my business. So, like, if you had a pet sitting business, you might have to buy pet food and doggy bags, right? In a CPA firm, I am not going to buy those things. They are not ordinary and necessary in the course of my business. So just to kind of use that type of mentality when thinking about that. Travel for me, yeah, I have to travel to see clients, right? I might do some other things while I'm there, but and same for your business, right? Maybe
Yep.
for a salon owner I mean, maybe not,
Yeah.
so
Well,
it's
yeah,
just
when I go to a conference, that is a business conference, that is a deductible expense. But when I go to Hawaii with my wife on vacation, that's not a
not a
deductible
deductible
expense.
expense. Exactly. I mean, and there is I call this a double-edged sword of deductions, right? So deductions are all fine and dandy while you're not paying taxes. But then when you go through a process, like you're going to guide someone through the due diligence and they have to go through the add back process of saying, oh, look, no, I got this personal expense on my business and this personal expense. I mean, there's a fatigue that occurs, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, is this really business? Like, this is
Mhm.
a lot of personal stuff in here. And so I think it just like, I don't know, it sort of like taints the view of a potential
Mhm.
buyer a little bit. So if your
Oh yeah.
business, you're really going to start thinking about selling 3 to 5 years out, don't worry about the taxes. Just get the books clean because if it impacts your valuation, what you can sell the business for, trust me, you'd rather have the money on the back end than save the taxes on the front end.
Yeah, that's I tell folks, look, you want to get good advice and be able to reduce your taxes as much as possible now, but if it comes down to it, pay your taxes now on stuff like that because you'll get it back in returns later. I'll give you an example. I don't know whether I've told you about this before or not, Susan, but I represented a client. We do buyer representation for M&A transactions, and I represented a client. We went and found a potential acquisition candidate for my client. My client was the buyer. And when we asked for the financials, and then we asked for any discretionary expenses, it took him about 4 or 5 days to come up and compile the list. And on that list, of course, there was, office cleaning and stuff, but he was paying for his children's cars, his parents' cars, his wife's cars. None of these people worked in the business. He was paying for his lawn guy at home, his pool guy at home. I mean, it finally, I mean, it would have been a great transaction for this guy to sell his business, but my buyer went, I'm out. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, there's no way. He's running his life out of that checkbook, and I'm not interested because I don't know what's underneath the covers there. And that story is very frequent for business owners who don't think about that. So look, everybody does it. My business pays for my car. Does it need to pay for my car? Probably not. But minimize those things. Don't be,
Yes.
whatever it is, minimize it and document it. Go ahead and pay the taxes now. You'll be in better shape when it's time to go sell the business because this stuff's going to come out of the woodwork. Uh,
Yeah.
And
And there's just this level of sophistication that you want to have when you go into the M&A process, right?
yeah.
I mean, credibility becomes really important. And
Uh,
I often talk about this of things looking pretty. I mean, even like I've seen QuickBooks files where I'm like, there's things in all uppercase and then some stuff all lowercase and then mixed case, and like it is not pretty. If I
no.
mean, that's the same thing as sending something that has like personal and business expenses all jumbled. It's just not pretty. And that's a turnoff to people. I mean, especially a qualified investor, they're like, this is clearly not the level of sophistication. I want to buy a better business.
Well, not only that, they're just when you see those things, you're just always in the back of your mind, what else is there?
What else is there? Absolutely. Well, I mean, you think, okay, this is the type of business owner we're talking about, right? So what else is happening in their business that I might not agree with, right?
Yep. Yep, exactly. So wow. So tax and business planning kind of go hand in hand, like hand in glove, right? I mean, I think that those things, business planning, tax planning, you should be doing both of these things. Many business owners don't take the time to think strategically and plan about their upcoming year. What are some of the things that a business owner should be really taking time to do now before this podcast is coming out on December 5th. You've still got time. What should they be doing before year end?
I've been thinking about this a lot. I just did a goal setting workshop yesterday with Tiffany Kettle. And she's with the Sandler Sales Training. And I really think that what we have to do is we have to talk about our priorities, and we got to really narrow it down. So it goes back to that thing, if everything's important, nothing's important. Like, it's a matter of business owners identifying their top 3 priorities and thinking only about that and pursuing that relentlessly. I was listening to the book, The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster by Darren Hardy. Have you read that one?
I have not, but it's on my list already. I know that.
Okay, I absolutely loved it. But he talked about how there's an example about how Richard Branson was asked to make this speech, and they said, we'll offer you $100,000. And he was like, no. And they said $250,000. And his office is like, no. And they're like $1 million. And he's like, no. I'm like, blank check, whatever you want. And the response back was, this is not on the priority list for Richard Branson. And so he's not going to dedicate any time to anything that is not going to further the achievement of his 3 key priorities. And that resonated with me a lot. I think business owners need to be thinking that way. Like, stop chasing the shiny objects. I mean, we're all guilty of it as CEOs, we're, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. Like, we got to stop doing that stuff because it is slowing us down in getting to where we need to be. So laser focused on the top 3 priorities and only work on things that make those things a reality.
I love that. I love that. I hadn't really heard that the top 3 and the focus course. I'm a big focus guy. I know where I'm going, and I always know that destination. I can plug into my Google Maps where I'm going and know that I'm getting there every single day. And I've got tips and tricks about that. If you want to know more, go back and listen to those podcasts. But so let me ask you this. I love that kind of setting the priorities and whatnot. How do you feel about, do you recommend that your clients budget for the upcoming year?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we actually have something we call a strategic planning cadence. So we have clients go through. And it incorporates, so we do like a plan on a page in the beginning of the year. And that's really narrowing down those 3 priorities and really defining what it looks like to achieve those, what the metrics look like all the tasks that are needed. We summarize it. And then we of course, doing the accounting and the tax. We get to a mid-year point. That's the checkup of like tax planning, mid-year tax planning. We talk about the advisors that we have. Is this person still serving you? And then we do a budget in the 3rd quarter. I think the budgets are great. A lot of business owners think of them like, oh, I'm going to get constrained by this budget. And like, what if I do better? And I believe that a budget is something that's going to hold you accountable. And most business owners, if they write it down that they're going to hit $10 million, they are going to work like hell to get to that $10 million. If they write down 8, they'll only get to 8. So it in their mind, it cements it as something they have to achieve. And every entrepreneur is wired the same way. I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. And they are relentless about it. So I think if they have some key things, like you're going to hit top line of this, you're going to have gross margin of this, these are the expense categories where this is the max on what you're going to spend. And we've got the accounting team saying, hey, you're about to go over your marketing budget. Stop. Then they are empowered with this. It's empowering to them. They're like, oh my gosh, I did it. I achieved what I set out to do. It cements in their mind that once they become intentional, they can actually do the things that they say they're going to do.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's right. And it's really kind of that focus. And you're right when you say, if you set this target, chances are you're going to hit it. I was just on with a client this morning, and they're just finishing up their budgeting process for next year. And they budget by departments and, the revenue and the expenses and all that. And one department that had a particularly soft year, set what they said, well, here's going to be our goal for next year. And she's like, no, no, it's going to be where it should be. And instead of 600K, it's going to be $1 million in revenue. And then she said, secretly, I'm demanding that because if I tell him it's $1 million, I know he can hit the 600. If he tells me 600, it's going to be okay if he hits 4. No.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think, there's a little bit of psychology in this, right? There's psychology here.
Well, and it also drags everybody in the same direction, right? And so, you get your whole, if you budget, I'm a big fan of budgeting kind of in silos, right? In your by department, because if everybody is kind of pulling in the same direction, and then everybody also knows the goals, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So, I think it goes together with the business planning, because then it sort of leads to this, well, if we generate this much money, right, and I've got this much profit, how much are we investing? That means I'm hiring this many people, right? So I can then work on this other priority. All of these things are interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So the budget, that's why we do the budget in the third quarter, because it's usually driving the discussion on priorities. It's like, well, your budget says that you're only going to have X, Y, Z. Like, how are you going to achieve this priority in January? And then they're like, dissonance. We have a problem. Okay, maybe that's not the right priority. Okay, then let's talk about what should the priority be. So it is a really, it's an interesting process to go through, especially with people who have never done it ever.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know that. By the way, that's almost all of our clients, right? That because
all of them,
we force them into doing a budget. I don't want the budget. I don't want that. No. We need to know this.
We need the budget.
Where we're going, right? If you've got a growth trajectory, how are you going to know when it's time to hire people, right? Can you handle? What's your capacity? All those things. You gives you time. To me, budgeting forces you to step back and think strategically about your business. That's why I love budgeting, and everybody should be doing that.
And it also, the other thing, Tom, and this is something that's on everybody's mind right now, is it time to reevaluate pricing, right? Mm-hmm. How much have my costs gone up?
Everybody's cost has gone up.
Yeah, the cost of everything has gone up. What will it take for me to get another person? Like, great if I want to hire another person, but realistically, I'll use that word negatively, what is it going to cost me, right? Because I'm going to have to hire a recruiter potentially. To get a good person.
Yep.
So there's definitely a lot of different considerations now that have to be happening, right? And I also think that I was listening to Good to Great this morning, and they were talking about the changes in the economies and the new economy and everything. And I was really thinking, I almost feel like we're entering into a time of a new economy, right? Mm-hmm. It feels like it. There's this great pace of change that's happening. And I think this really should encourage every business owner to rethink, what am I doing it? What am I doing? How am I offering it? How am I pricing it? How am I selling it? How am I structuring the sales? All the things on the top line, think about that, because now's the time to be contemplating change.
Yeah. And when was that? Good to Great. It's sitting on my shelf. I can see it right here. And in fact, I'm just going to grab it. For those of you who are watching, you're going to see me step away for a second because it's one of my favorite books. And you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, how many notes and things that I've got, how many stickies on these pages in this book. The reason I grabbed it was it talks about kind of the new economy, right? That's coming. And this book was written in, let me get to the right page here. Come on. Give me why can't people just put everything in the right place when you do it? All right, here we go. It is written in first. I've got a first edition here in 2001. So it was written 21 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it was talking about a new economy then. And by the way, I think since this book was written, we're in probably the third new economy since this book is written. And so you got to think about that. What is going on around you and how are things changing? And you see, I mean, I'm just a giant fan of that book and good to great. And so I should do a whole podcast on.
You should do a podcast on that.
But I love, and I have to pause here and say, I love the fact that you're listening to books. Tony Robbins calls that net time, no extra time. You can listen to books when you're driving, as opposed to listening to the news or listening to music. You can learn things while you're doing other things, right? You're driving and you can use that time to learn. You can do it when you're on your walk in the morning or when you're exercising or whatever it is. Use that time. I am a voracious user of Audible, and that's what I do. I listen to books, I read books, and use that time. I'm just a huge fan of that. All right,
it's great. I had to wait for my Audible credit. I'm like, is it there yet? There yet? There yet? Where is it?
Well, here's what happens to me. Karen uses my Audible account, and I'll think, oh, I got a new credit, and I go to get a book, and I'm like, where are all my credits?
Stolen credits.
Someone stole my credits. So that's all right. She listens to books too. She's an entrepreneur and she listens to books that I like to listen to as well. So it is great fun. Get Audible if you don't have it. All right, we're off on a tangent.
Amen.
Let's get back and focus on corporate and tax structure, like C corps, S corps, LLC partnerships. How frequently should a business owner examine their structure? And are there reasons that they want to move potentially from one structure to another structure?
There's plenty of reasons why you might want to consider moving. Some of them are tax related. Some of them are transition, succession related. There's a variety of different, and of course, a methodology to each of those types of approaches. I'm a fan of just revisiting every year, and that really should just be something during tax planning. I mean, we look at it for all of our clients when we go through tax planning anyway. We might not necessarily be having a discussion with them saying, hey, we've been thinking about your entity planning. But when we internally get together and talk about a client, we're always thinking about the structure of the entity and what's going on in their operations and things like that. And, every business owner is so different, like what they get into once they start making money. Some of them start investing in real estate. Some of them are more interested in maybe saving for retirement. Different priorities are going to yield different tax planning strategies. Some of that is also going to show up in the structure, the entity structure, even estate planning, right? An FLP. Does that make sense? And, we would highly possibly appreciating assets we can get in there and get it out of their estate. So, we just go through that process and talk about and really consider all of those things. What could we be doing differently? Right.
Yep, totally. And I'm a big fan of pass-through entities, right? Where the taxable goes to the owners, the taxable income flows to the owners as opposed to a C corp, because especially in a small business, business that doesn't matter, I guess, really on size, anything less than 100 million in revenue. They're almost all going to be asset purchases as opposed to a stock purchase. And then you wind up with the whole double taxation if you're a C corp. And it's really important to do that. It occurred to me this year. I think about this a lot when I talk with clients, because many of our clients engage with us as they're kind of running into that home stretch, right? I want to sell my business in 3 years. Well, tell me about the entity. And we start talking about it, and I discover that it's a C corp. My advice to them typically, and I would love to hear your reaction because I'm not a CPA, and although I did sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I tell them, look, I know you want to sell your business in 3 years, but there's no guarantee you're going to be able to. And so my suggestion is at the beginning of the year, when you can, go ahead and convert to a pass-through entity, an LLC or an S corp, because even if that gets you at least ahead of the game, and let's say that your business doesn't sell in 3 years, it sells in 5, then perfect.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
But if you do, then we'll figure out some tax strategies around that in the meantime. But that's what I tell them. Just go ahead. I know that you should have done this 2 years ago. Go ahead and do it now.
Yeah, I
Is that
agree.
good advice?
Yes, it's excellent advice. And you're right. No one has a crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen. So,
Well, and the average transaction takes, 12 to 18 months. And so let's say
oh,
your business is not ready for 3 years. It might take two more years to sell it.
yeah. Well, and
So,
then, you got to think about the actual coming to terms with selling your business. I mean, some people have a hard time with that. So, I mean, they might get a couple of deals and be like, back out, back out. That's not enough. I mean, because it has nothing to do with the deal. It has everything to do with them. So, sometimes
yes.
even those types of conversations and time, it takes a little longer. So I would say, yes.
Oh, yeah. It's,
If,
by the
if
way, it's mandatory for our clients to read. I have one behind me here. Oh, let me just roll back and grab it. Uh, I don't know if you've read this before. Denise Logan's book, The Seller's Journey.
I have it, is on my list to read.
It
I've
is.
not read it yet.
I saw Denise last night. She happened to be in town, and she's working with me on a couple of projects. But this book is all about the psychology of the seller, right? And what you're going through. And so I require our clients to read it because if you understand then kind of what's going to happen psychologically, then perhaps you can be better prepared for it. But it doesn't matter. I've got one client that's really in the home stretch right now that I basically about every other day have to drive to his office and sit down and go, breathe.
Breathe
Breathe.
and breathe.
Right. It's okay. I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of questions here, but that's when a lot of these deals fall apart because they're just not mentally prepared for
Well,
that transaction.
and so probably a good idea to go ahead and just make that a selection and convert, because I think chances are pretty good that most business owners sort of speed up and slow down when it comes to the M&A process. Like, okay, yeah, I'm gung ho. And then they're like, wait a minute, what am I going to do next? Right. And then, well, okay, no, I'm ready. That number looks really good. And then, I mean, I think it's this like, a little bit of back and forth. So you're right.
Yeah.
Chances are pretty good. It's going to take a little longer than expected. So
Yeah.
from an entity perspective, I mean, S corporations are really lovely, especially right now with the QBI deduction that's expected to sunset in 2025, although perhaps there will be some change in our legislators who will make that extension or permanent in the tax code, which would be really, really lovely for a lot of people. So yeah, there are some additional tax benefits right now to just living in that QBI environment.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. All right. One last one. We've gone a long way here, and thank you for hanging out with us a little bit extra over time today. I have to get you my last questions though, and I should go back and have a compilation of your answers to this question. But the last question I always ask is: this podcast is all about maximizing business value. So, Susan, from your perspective, what is the one most important thing a business owner should do before year end to build long-term value in their business?
Before year end. Oh.
Sorry, I threw that twist in there, didn't I?
Yeah. Oh, meet with me. That's your number one. It's going to add a lot of value. Actually, I think that being really thoughtful about who you are working with in the coming year and what your goals are and aligning those two together, getting everybody on the same page. I think that alignment. And even aligning yourself. Like, are you doing what you want to do? Are you working on the things you want to work on? I feel like there's a lot of like disjoint. I don't know, people who are just kind of out of alignment with what they really would or could want to do. And I think that's where people should spend some time before year end. They would add a lot of value in the coming year because then they would be able to focus on their priorities.
I love that answer. It's the first time I've heard that. So 138 episodes, and that's the first time I've heard that answer. But it made me think about another book, which is one of my favorites, and that's Jen Sincero's "You're a Badass." And she's got a badass series. I listened to this yesterday as I was driving back from a meeting in Dallas. I listened to that book frequently. I read it, listen to it, make notes in it, just like you saw the other books that I have. But I'll paraphrase this because I actually wrote it down. I kept rewinding it and listened to it probably 20 times last night. And I'm paraphrasing here. And when you think about alignment and what you're talking about, aligning even on your own, what are my own goals? Where do I want to go? Are you the kind of person who just accepts what you can get, or the kind of person who creates what you want?
Mm,
Uh, I think
powerful.
that aligns perfectly with your answer, and that's like now the thing that I try to have something, a quote like that I just kind of ponder, and I think that is hugely important as we move into year end. All right. I know I've asked you this question before, but I'm anxious to see if your answer has changed. What personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble? I usually say throughout the years, but over the last year, since we
Mm.
last talked on this podcast, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble?
Well, I turned 45, so my husband
Oh,
warned me that I'd have less of a filter after I turned 45. And he was right. I am far too outspoken. As soon as I turned 45, he was like, what is going on? You are really mouthy. And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm just saying everything that I think.
I'm warning him right now. I know your husband, and he should listen to this podcast. By the way, brother, you made that a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That we did. He spoke it into existence. So lately that's been getting me in a lot of trouble. But actually, it's kind of interesting because um I think I think that it's actually created a little bit more courage in me to say the things that maybe I wouldn't have said before. That even at work and professionally as a leader, because I will only ever get what I want or need or whatever it is that I have in my head if I can clearly communicate and articulate it to someone else. So, and I have to have the courage to do that.
Yeah. Oh yes, yes, you do. Most people who know me realize that I have almost no filters, right? I never have, but it also needs to have a little tact sometimes if you're desiring a different result.
I call that diplomacy,
Yeah,
diplomacy.
right. I've never had the filter, but the older I get, the more tact I'm starting to
Oh,
use, right?
that is excellent. Oh, that's so good. See, we're all growing in so many ways. And
Yes, we are.
it's
Yes, we
really
are.
interesting. I sort of, I like to use that always measure backward thing, right? And to reflect upon even myself a year ago. And I will go back and listen to the podcast of myself that we recorded 2 years ago or something. That must have been.
Yeah,
Back then I was a fraction of the person that I am today. And how remarkable is to have that type of growth in ourselves.
yeah.
It's just fun. It's just amazing. So
Oh
thank
yeah.
you. Thank
I've
you for being
had
a part of that for me.
I love being a part of it with you, and I hear the same thing. People tell me frequently, "Gosh, your podcasts are just different than they used to be," and I'm like, I always thought they were pretty good, but you're right. I guess I am growing and changing and creating a better product for our customers. It's like you. We're very passionate about education, right? They get this podcast. You can have this podcast for free. You can have all of my ebooks for free, just like Susan's website. You can go download a bunch of stuff for free. Go use these free things. And when it's time to engage, we're here, ready, and waiting for you, just like Susan is. And speaking of which, how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Susan Bryant, CPA, CTC. You'll find me there. Email me, sbryant@mbgcpa.com. So just give me a shout out. Happy to answer questions, be a resource in any way.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming back and visiting with our audience again and visiting with me. You make our podcast better. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Tom.
You can find Susan Bryant at mbgcpa.com, or on LinkedIn, as she said. Or, of course, you can always reach out to me and I'll make a warm introduction to my good friend, Susan Bryant. I strongly, strongly urge you to go to the website, mbgcpa.com, and download the ebook right from her website, or you can use the link that comes out in the newsletter this Friday. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast, because if you follow us, you'll get advance notice. You'll know before everybody else does when we've dropped a new podcast. And throw in your comments. We love your comments and we respond to all of them. Until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to plan for year end while you still have time as you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.